we go back on the record in People versus Limon via 166801A. The record reflect that she's present in court with her attorney, Mr. Terry. She's still on the stand, subject to cross by Mr. Smith, who's present in court. We do have all 12 plus 4 in the box. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I apologize for the delay. That piece of equipment over there that we refer to as the Nomad, I think that's the name of the company that makes it, or the model number, was being temperamental this morning. We got somebody down here, and I think we've got it figured out. As much as we've paid for that thing, it better work. All right. When we broke yesterday, Mr. Smith was on cross. Mr. Smith, if you'd like to continue.
Ms. Limon, when we stopped, you were talking about your husband having an affair with Kelly. How did that affect your relationship with your husband, since she was your best friend?
It affected me in many ways now, looking at it, but we were living it, so I didn't really let it affect me. I just kept going with it.
You were drinking at the time?
Yes, it was.
How much?
Quite a bit.
Okay. How often?
A lot.
When you say a lot, what do you mean?
Some weeks it would be daily, but just depending, I guess.
Now, during this time, where were the kids?
In school.
Were you drinking while they were in school?
I would, and we'd be out on the lake, and the kids would be playing at the park, and there'd be all of us there. So they were always well taken care of. But
When you drank a lot, did that keep you from caring for your kids?
sometimes it did, yes.
Leanna testified that she hung out with her dad regularly. Her words for hanging out with you prior to his death was sometimes.
Leanna was nervous yesterday, Mr. Smith.
That was her testimony, was it not, Miss Limon?
Yes.
Okay. So while the kids are at school, you're drinking. While you're at the lake, you're drinking, but somebody else is taking care of them. That's your testimony.
No.
When did you just say that?
I took care of my children.
Who took care of them while you were drinking?
I would take care of them while I was drinking sometimes. Robert would take care of them. Friends, they would be with my parents. They'd be with their friends sometimes. Just depended.
And did the children know to leave you alone when you were still drunk the following morning?
Did they know to leave me alone? No.
During your interview with Detective Meyer, November 18th, this would be page 26, line 14 through 19, you said in parties and just kind of like that kind of lifestyle, more like now the kids weren't exposed to that firsthand. They were probably, not probably, they were exposed to me drinking, like too much. Mom sleeping doesn't feel good kind of thing. Were they told to leave you alone when you were sleeping the next day, when you were drunk?
Oh, no, I would get up and take care of the children if Robert was not home. If he was home, he would tell them to let me sleep.
So what's meant by your statement, mom sleeping doesn't feel good kind of thing? What does that mean?
Mom's not feeling good this morning?
Because of drinking.
Unfortunately, yes, at that time.
You said that when you opened up your marriage with Rob, you had your sacred bond broken. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes, I do.
And then you said later that you created a sacred bond with Jonathan.
I didn't say I created a sacred bond, I don't think. I meant more along the lines of, I guess we had a one-on-one relationship versus an sharing I don't know how to explain it.
Okay. You had a sacred bond with Jonathan. That was your testimony yesterday.
Okay, I guess that's how it felt. That's what it felt like.
So your testimony today was that your sacred bond with Robert was broken, but you had a sacred bond with Jonathan.
No.
The question was that your testimony yesterday?
I know the first part, my sacred bond with Robert, I felt like it was broken after we opened our marriage. That's all I meant.
Now, why were you drinking so much after the sacred bond with Robert was broken?
Well, that's how we functioned. I would not have behaved the way that I behaved and done the things that I had done without being under the influence,
Okay.
for sure.
So you were covering the pain.
At the time, I didn't realize it, but over time, I definitely was covering the pain with drinking.
Now, in the time frame, we're kind of, yesterday we're moving from 2013 into 2014. Did you feel like you were disrespecting your husband in your affair?
Yes, there were times where I would feel very bad.
With those, what did you do with those feelings? Did you act on them? Did you do anything?
There were discussions that I had with Robert privately.
Show you what's been previously marked in the evidence. People 67. This is the first page. I'm going to start with the date. This is from December 27th, 2013, or 2 days after Christmas. You recognize the photograph? I can zoom in if you need to.
I've never seen that picture before now,
Okay.
and I find that very strange that
Okay. But who's in the photograph?
that's Jonathan.
Okay. And where is he at?
That's my room.
So you allowed him into yours and Robert's bedroom for your affair 2 days after Christmas in 2013.
I don't know. I did not take that picture. I was not aware of that picture whatsoever.
Okay.
I was shocked when I saw that picture.
Okay. Why, you were shocked that there's a record of the extended affair?
Why would he take that picture? A selfie in my mirror? In
You
my
took
home?
quite a few selfies, didn't you? So,
He
taking a
never
selfie.
sent that to me.
Well, what's odd about taking a selfie? And we've seen
In my
tons of
room?
yours.
In my room, privately, that's like something he, in a way, I felt like kept. It just felt weird to see that picture.
So where is he standing?
In my bathroom dressing area.
Okay. You had Jonathan Hearn over to your house for your affair around Christmas time in 2013.
I don't remember that.
So it's your testimony that Jonathan broke into your house and took the photo?
No.
Okay. Now, when you were having Jonathan over to share the bedroom that you shared with your husband, did you feel like you were disrespecting your husband?
I guess how I justified it in my mind was we had shared our bed with other people before, so
So you were okay with it then?
I wasn't okay with it, but I guess that's how I justified it at the time.
You also stated in early 2014 your priorities were off. What did you mean by that?
They were very off at that time in my life. Drinking, partying, having open sexual relationships, then having a side affair. It's pretty off.
Okay. So there's kind of a discrepancy between how you're testifying. You're saying it was super fun, and then you're saying later on that your priorities were off. Which
Yes.
one is it?
My priorities were off.
How much was Rob working around this time?
Around what time?
I'm sorry. Early 2014.
Probably quite a bit, I would say, but I don't really remember exactly.
You also testified that you had the best of both worlds yesterday.
Yes.
What was the best of your world with Jonathan?
The best of my world. It was just a whole different experience altogether. Romantic, fantasizing, dreaming, just a whole different, feeling and way of being exposed to life, just with his views and I don't know. It was like it was just different, but I had a good life with Robert as well.
All right. As to the world that you led with Robert, let me summarize what you testified to yesterday and some today. You were drinking heavily. You were with a husband that worked constantly. You asked him to go to counseling and he would not do it because he enjoyed the lifestyle. Your husband was carrying on an affair with your best friend, and you were carrying on an affair as well. So what part of your world with Robert, based on the list you've given us, is the best of it?
Our family, our children, our home, our love that we had for one another.
I'm sure you look back on that fondly, but I'm asking you, what about it at that time, with all the things that I've listed, made it the best of your world?
We still had a good life. Life was still good. It wasn't perfect. It became obviously misprioritized and changed over time. It wasn't as it once was, but it was still a good life.
Your life was so good, in fact, that you started an affair and then began to plan a new life with that man.
I fantasized about life.
So I'll rephrase then. Your life was so great that you had an affair with somebody, and all you could dream about was a new life with that man.
It's not all I could dream about.
What was going to be so good about your future with Jonathan that you would fantasize? I mean, that's a pretty strong word. Fantasize about it.
Oh, I don't remember. In the moment, it was
Of course. Show you what's been marked as People's 62. This is a card she wrote to Jonathan.
okay.
Did you recognize the card?
Sure, I would. Yep.
I'll show you now what's been marked as People's 64. If you could look at that card, please. People 64. When is that from?
February 14th, 2014.
Okay. What is February 14th, 2014?
Valentine's Day.
Pretty important day for couples. Recall writing this note?
I remember writing notes and cards, yes.
What did you write to Robert that year?
I'm sure I wrote him a card as well.
Start at the top. My Jonathan. I love you for finding the part of me that I never thought I'd find. Why did you write that?
Because obviously that's how I was feeling at that moment.
You were missing something in your life at that time.
Apparently, I guess I was.
I love you for wanting and needing me by your side. Why did you write that?
That's how I was feeling at the time, I suppose.
I love for you being the one you choose to care for. Did you write that? I'm sorry. I can direct your attention.
I guess that's how I felt at the time as well.
I love you for the special meaning you have brought to my life. Wrote that as well.
I did.
So he brought special meaning to your life. That implies you did not have that before.
I definitely had special meaning to my life.
Did you write, thank you for adding to my special meaning? Or did you write, you brought it to my life?
It says that you have brought to my life.
I love you for hopes and faith in our future together. You wrote that?
I did write that.
On Valentine's Day in 2004.
That was the date.
6 months before your husband was murdered by the person you wrote this note to.
That's where.
Go over that line again. I love you for the hopes and faith in our future together. Future together. You wrote that.
I did write that.
Okay. And this was written 6 months before your husband was killed by the man you wrote that note to.
That doesn't mean that I wanted my husband killed.
That wasn't the question. This was written 6 months before the man you wrote this note to killed your husband.
I'm aware of that today.
I'm going to direct your attention to the bottom line. I love you for so many reasons. I've only written a few. But in all that years bring to us. This is something that is, you're planning a future together. What the years bring to us. It's not what the years bring to Robert and you. What the years bring to us. What did you mean by that statement?
I don't know what I meant by that statement. Besides the life I was living with Jonathan, I'm sure the things I wrote to Robert were something.
I never want you to forget that you were made for me and I was made for you. So you were made for Jonathan.
Jonathan and I would talk a lot about our paths crossing for a reason, purpose. We were meant to know one another, kind of a thing. So I guess that's how part of me felt.
So since you were made for each other, you were meant to be together.
I don't know. I was not in. My priorities were off at that time.
We just saw we wrote a future together, and now you're talking about being meant for each other. Since you were made for each other, you were meant to be together.
No,
You realize these are your own words.
I do realize that.
Okay. What other stuff would you talk about with Jonathan about the future and your future plans?
Oh, I'm sure many things at the time. I don't
Just generalize, please.
We talked about everything. A lot of things.
All right. Did you talk about how you're going to raise the kids?
Not how we were going to raise the kids, how he would always make suggestions in regards to his opinions on children.
I'll read you a portion of your interview with Detective Meyer, November 18, 2020, or 2014. We talk about things, and being together, the kids, talk about the kids, raising the kids. We talked about that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
How badly things were being done. Did you talk about that with Jonathan?
That's kind of, I just mentioned I would talk to him about the children, yes.
Ms. Limon, I'm just using your own words. I'm not making this up. I'm just using your own words.
I understand they sound pretty scrambled. I was not in a good place.
So you talked with Jonathan about being together.
Yes,
And that's in line with what we've just seen up in the Valentine's Day note.
I realize that.
In your own words, you would talk about the kids, raising the kids.
I didn't talk to him about him and I raising the kids.
You started it out with, we'd talk about things. And then, that same sentence, you said, talk about the kids, raising the kids.
Talked about raising my children, yes, but I would take his suggestions and opinions on his views of raising children at that time.
You said around this time frame you weren't going to church very regularly?
What time around?
We're still in early 2014.
I don't remember when I started going back to church again.
Did you talk to Jonathan about going to church regularly?
Yes, finding a church home or a church to attend to. Yes.
Did you talk to Jonathan about the children going to church regularly?
I'm sure.
You testified that you went to the property, a property of Mr. Hearn, sometime around this time frame as well. I guess it had rained, something like that. Do you recall testifying to that?
Yes, I don't remember when that was, though.
Okay. Was that before or after Robert's death?
Before.
Okay. Now, do you recall if Jonathan kind of shared his visions with you about what he wanted that property to look like?
Yes, I do remember.
What were some of his, I guess, visions of what he wanted it to look like?
I just remember him saying about a lot of windows that he had drawn up, that he'd already had this plan, this whatever it's called, it was like he was already drawing it up, but this was early on.
What did you think of the property?
It was fine. It was nice. I encouraged him. Told him it was.
In your future that you talked about, and you're testifying that you fantasized about, what type of home were you planning on living in with Jonathan?
What type of home was I planning on living with him? I never planned on living in a home with him. And after losing Robert, we did speak of being together, but I couldn't even process all of that time.
You said that you also talked about if anything was to happen to Rob, what you guys would do.
When did I say that?
I believe yesterday. Did you ever talk about that? Just in your fantasies? Well, what if something happened to Rob?
Not if something happened to him.
Okay. Well, what did you talk about then?
Well, if Robert and I weren't together anymore.
Did you talk about divorce with Jonathan?
Yes.
What was the conversation like?
I don't remember exactly what it was like. We would speak of it. I do know he made Bible references in regards to divorce, and I don't know exactly what, I don't remember exactly how our conversations went.
Okay. I'm going to read you another portion of a transcript. This is from your interview with Detective Meyer, again, staying with November 18, 2014.
Okay.
This is page 41, line 17. We talked about, divorce, and, like if anything was to happen to Robert, and then you said not gunshots, not that. So in that context, what did you mean by like if anything was to happen to Robert?
I don't know what I meant by that.
Well, you talked in the first part of the sentence about divorce, so you're not talking about divorce. So what does that leave? That leaves an accident. That leaves something horrible. If anything was to happen to Robert.
I don't know what I meant.
And these are conversations based on their context that you had, again, this is your own words, with Jonathan Hearn prior to the death of your husband. Is that true?
My interviews with Detective Meyer, I was not in a good place. I was scared. I was nervous. So my conversations with Detective Meyer were, I've listened to them and I don't understand some of them myself. So.
So you're going to testify that your conversation with Detective Meyer that we all watched, which was a very cordial interview, that now you're going to testify that you were scrambled and didn't know what you were saying.
Yes. I was stressed.
I can understand that you're under arrest for murder. Talk about starting a whole new life with Jonathan?
Did I?
No. Did you talk to him about starting a whole new life with Jonathan? I'm not talking about planning the murder. I'm talking about starting a whole new life.
Did I talk to who?
Jonathan Hearn.
About starting a whole new life?
Yes.
Yes, we would.
go to April 25th. Do you recall, now that you've kind of seen some phone records and some cell tower information, do you recall that weekend? Does it stand out at all to you?
What was the date? I'm sorry.
April 24th, April 25th.
Does that weekend stand out to me? No. Leanna's birthday's on April 20th. So that's all that stands out to me in April.
April 25th, according to the records, is the day you got the burner phone that we've heard so much about. So does that help make the day stand out?
No.
Prior to the calls that we saw on the burner phone records, which ends in 7958, do you recall calling Jonathan and talking with him extensively earlier that morning?
I don't, but I'm sure that I did.
Now, what did you talk with Jonathan on that day? I mean, that's a day you got a burner phone. I'm sure the conversation had to be about getting a phone.
Well, I had gotten prior phones. Maybe talked about that one working better than the other ones were working. I don't remember.
Okay.
Along with other things, if it was a long conversation.
Showing you what's been marked previously as People's 19. This is Jonathan Hearn's records, what ends in 3569. Just to kind of lead you through. 4/25/2014 at 6:43 a.m. There is an outgoing call from a number 760-241-8060 that lasts 63 minutes or 1 hour. Okay. Whose number is that? 241-8060.
That was her home line.
So you called Jonathan Hearn, or you talked to Jonathan Hearn at 6:43 in the morning on April 25th.
Okay.
Would you recall anything different than the business records from T-Mobile?
What's that again?
Do you recall anything different other than the business records that have been received pursuant to search warrant and subpoena from T-Mobile?
Do I recognize anything different?
Do you recall anything different than what we see here?
No.
No. Let's move down to 9/11. That's what ends in showing 8-2. There is a call to 760-241-8060. That again is your home phone?
Yes.
Okay. And then at 9:45 a.m., another call, 760-241-8060. That's a call to your home phone. Do you recall talking about the burner phone that day?
I don't remember.
Did you talk to Jonathan Hearn about getting a phone to escape law enforcement detection?
No.
Okay. Well, we see all these calls that are going to 241-8060. They end on April 25th when you get the burner phone. So
It was so Robert wouldn't find phone records. I was more worried about cell phones at that time.
did you ever see the cell phone bill come to your house?
Yes.
Okay. Did the cell phone bill have a listing of every call that was made by you?
No.
Okay. So how would Robert know that you were calling Jonathan Hearn on his phone? Was he going to subpoena the records?
No, you can look them up online.
What about your home phone?
I'm not sure.
So you don't recall what you talked about that day that you got the phone that would ultimately be seized in this investigation?
No.
Do you recall calling your husband and speaking with him after these phone calls to Jonathan Hearn?
No.
So do you know if you called your husband on April 25th, 2014?
No. Do I recall calling him?
Yes.
No.
Show you what's been marked. Moved into evidence, People's 84. This is your husband's cell phone records from April 25th, 2014. In column C, that's his number. Column B's ending in 7845. You recognize the number? So on April 25th, starting at 10:15, or approximately 1/2 hour after your last conversation with Jonathan Hearn, you then call your husband multiple times. Do you see that? I can highlight the line. The calling party number is 241-8060. Whose number is that?
It's our home phone number.
Okay. You called the number 7845. Whose number is that?
That was Robert's cell phone number.
And that occurred at 10:15 and lasted about a minute and a half.
Okay.
You made subsequent phone calls as well to your husband. There's one at 1 o'clock as well from the home phone.
Probably.
So as it relates to April 25th, 2014, you did call your husband that day.
If that's what it shows, then yes, I did.
And on April 25th, 2014, you called your husband after talking extensively to Jonathan Hearn.
That was nothing out of the ordinary.
Well, you earlier
Unfortunately.
testified you don't remember what you talked about.
I don't remember what we talked
Okay.
about. That was nothing out of the ordinary.
Ms. Limon, if you don't remember what you talked about, then you can't say it's nothing out of the ordinary.
I talked to Jonathan a lot, and I talked to Robert a lot.
God's purpose, did it mean you and Jonathan Hearn coming together?
I suppose that was part of it. That was used a lot in our dialogue at that time.
Would it be fair to say that you and Jonathan kind of use buzzwords or code words when you were talking to each other?
Like what?
Well, God's purpose. Seems like kind of the way it's used kind of seems like a code word.
No, we use that word a lot for everything. A lot of things.
Okay, well, what else did you use it for?
Every person, place, and thing. I feel like now, looking back, that was, we spoke a lot about that.
Have you ever justified negative actions through religion?
Yes.
And how would you do that? What was the process you went through?
Well, at the time, I didn't feel like it. I felt like things that we were speak about were in depth, and they felt at the time biblically based speaking. It felt right. Praying, finding purpose in what God's word and things like that, but it's definitely misplaced.
Okay, so what actions were you justifying with this biblically based research you were doing with Mr. Hearn?
Objective characterization is
Rephrase that, Counselor.
Well, what negative actions were you justifying through religion?
What negative actions? Well, I'm sorry, ask me that again. What negative actions was I...
My initial question was, did you justify negative actions, or have you justified negative actions through religion?
At the time, I didn't feel like I was justifying them. I was more kind of feeling bad. Jonathan would we read Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, every day, or he'd want me to read it if he couldn't speak to me. He'd want me to memorize scripture. And so I kind of felt bad because a lot of scripture was definitely opposite of our behavior, my personal behavior, and my behavior in my marriage, and just in general, all the way around.
All right, so the study of Scripture made you think that what you were doing was not right.
Who I was not right, I guess.
Moving on to May 23rd, 2014. The week prior, you knew that Jonathan was in Monterey for some type of training session.
Yes.
Do you recall speaking with Jonathan on his return to home?
Yes. I don't remember. I feel like there were different times that I had spoken to him on his trip, but and I remember his sister being with him on that trip.
And you would know that how?
He had told me.
Was his sister with him on the trip in Monterey visiting, or was she with him on the trip home?
I'm not sure. I believe there.
In Monterey?
Yes.
Okay. So you're not aware of who was with him on his trip home?
No, I don't remember.
Okay. Where was Robert that day?
I don't remember that day specifically. Looking back at hearing the records, apparently he was up in Tehachapi that day, but I don't remember that specific date or where Robert was.
You've testified quite a bit that you and Jonathan shared every detail about your lives, what you were doing.
Most. Many.
So it's your testimony that he didn't provide details of his trip to you as he was traveling.
He had shared about his weekend and his training, the area at the beach, a hike that he'd went on. I remember that with his sister, I believe. Pretty sure.
Based on the records, he called you from Tehachapi, near to where your husband's business was located.
I did not know that his location was in or near Tehachapi.
You had, in your own testimony, or not testimony, but in the records, you had told Jonathan where Robert's shop was at.
I had not given him a specific address, or I had given him bits of information of Robert's workplace in both places, because he would inquire over time. I would say from the very beginning of our relationship, he would inquire bits and pieces that didn't seem out of the ordinary or struck me too odd. There were things that were disturbing that he had told me, and then I would brush him off as if it was like a sweet gesture that he was so in tune and inquisitive of my world.
In some of, again, November 18, 2014, you told with Detective Brewer and Detective Meyer that it was about 6 months prior that you had told him that where the location was.
I don't remember exactly if that was...
And 6 months prior to November is May.
I don't remember. That was a guess on my part.
You said that you gave Mr. Hearn bits and pieces. What bits and pieces did you give him about the BNSF shop?
I had told him that Tehachapi was nowhere I'd want to live, and I had explained what it was when the children and I had been up there, and what that was like, and what Rob did there, and things Robert would tell me about his adventures up there, working. And that was something I did with him, share.
Which one of those conversations leads you to telling him where Robert's shop is?
I don't remember what led me to specifically tell him that. I think I would say more of bits and pieces throughout time that I shared with him.
Did you describe the shop to him?
I don't remember. I know I remember telling him if we would go up there, what we would do or what it was like. and possibly there would be descriptions of the shop, possibly.
Okay. Did you describe the layout of the shop?
No.
So when you're giving descriptions of the shop, what are you talking about?
Probably how the kids would play, or I'm not sure.
We'll move on to August of 2014. On August 17th, what were you doing that day? If you could just describe your day up until you got the notification.
It was the day before the kids' first day of school, so I know I was anxious about getting them ready for school. I went to church. Robbie was at a friend's, and I wanted Robbie home, and I wanted to get them on school mode.
Okay. What else did you do?
I did talk to Jonathan that day. And like I said, I was ready to get the kids off to school, so. And I also talked to Robert that day as well.
Okay. And did you go to your mother's?
I did, yes.
Now, in your first two interviews with law enforcement, you told them that you went to church. You told them that you were getting the kids ready for school. You told them that you went to your mother's house. You told them where the kids were. You told them that you had conversations with Rob. You told them that you called Robert over and over again, and that you kissed Rob goodbye in the morning. You
I
recall
did.
all that?
Yes.
Okay. What did you leave out of the list of things that you did that day?
Jonathan.
You said you talked to Jonathan that day. Do you know how long you talked to Jonathan?
I don't remember exactly how long.
I added it up. 223 minutes. 3 hours and 45 minutes you talked with Jonathan Hearn prior to him leaving to go kill your husband.
I did not know he was leaving to go kill my husband.
That wasn't in the question. 3 hours and 45 minutes prior to him going to kill your husband.
Question.
Ask your questions.
So, did you talk to him for 3 hours and 45 minutes prior to him going to kill your husband?
You just said I did.
Okay. Well, let's go to the records.
That was nothing out of the ordinary either.
These are the phone calls made between, so outgoing and incoming, between your phone set that ends in 7958 and Jonathan Hearn's phone. Starting at 6:40 in the morning, you talked to him for 34 minutes. You recall what you talked about?
I don't specifically remember what we talked about, no.
Okay. At 8:11, you talked to him for 33 minutes.
I talk to him all the time.
Okay. Well, this is the date that your husband was killed, so it should be in your mind.
Okay.
At 8:47, you talked to him for 46 minutes. What did you talk to him about?
I'm sure I let him know that I was anxious for the kids to go to school, going to church, and I don't specifically remember. Besides, those would be things I would tell him, I'm sure.
Okay. 12:05, 80 minutes. 80-minute long conversation. What did you talk about?
I don't remember.
One hour and 20 minutes you were talking to him. And it's your testimony that you don't recall what he said to you.
I don't remember what I said. Nothing that stands out besides what I would assume, what I would talk about at that moment in time.
Well, generally you would talk probably, if it's 80 minutes, about what you were doing that day.
Probably. Yes.
Do you have those types of conversations with Jonathan where he would tell you what he's doing that day?
Yes. He didn't tell me he was going to Tehachapi to kill my husband.
3 hours and 45 minutes, and all you can think of that you talked about is that you were anxious for the next day.
I don't remember exactly what I said, but we would talk for hours upon hours, and what I could tell you right now is I don't remember exactly what those hours consisted of, because that was then and this is now.
In some of your recordings, I believe with Detective Meyer, you talked about how your husband called about 1 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what phone you spoke to him on?
It would probably be our landline.
Okay. So the call that started at 12:05, that one lasted 80 minutes. That means you got off of that call around 1:30.
Okay.
So what did you tell Jonathan, since you were on the phone with Jonathan when you talked to your husband, that your husband had said to you during the conversation?
What did I tell Jonathan what my husband had said to me?
Yes.
I don't remember telling Jonathan anything my husband had said to me that day.
So you're on the phone with Jonathan Hearn on your burner phone,
Yeah.
and on the other phone you're talking to your husband.
I don't remember that, but if that was the case, then I still don't remember what I had said. That was nothing out of the ordinary either at that time in my life. I'm sure looking back on prior records besides just this day, there were other things just like this that you would find.
Well, you provided a pretty extensive list of what you talked to Robert about to the detectives the day they talked to you. There was $1 million train, he was getting a sandwich, he was tired, all of these things. Okay. Did you mention to them that, oh, by the way, I was on a burner phone with my boyfriend at the same time the conversation I'm talking about?
No, I did not.
Well, why not?
Because I did not want to tell them about my affair.
I'm drawing your attention to lines ending in beginning of 421. This is a call dialed from 7845, your husband's phone, to your landline, 241-860.
Okay.
That happened at 1306. There's the next call at 1306. Lasts for 100 seconds or a minute and a half. That one goes from your husband's cell phone to your cell phone. So, based on the records, burner phone in one hand with Jonathan Hearn, who's within a half an hour of going to kill your husband, you on your other phone talking to your husband.
They were minute-long phone calls to Robert?
Well, that's what the business records show, yes.
And it shows I answered the phone?
Yes.
Actually, Your Honor, I object, no evidence to support that.
There was testimony that if there's an F, it's a voicemail. So it is a call.
Your Honor, that's with regards to cell phone. There's no evidence with regards to a landline.
So my
Proceed, Mr.
Okay. So you're on your phone from your husband's. He's calling you to your cell phone at 1 o'clock. This is what you told Detective Meyer.
well, when I had talked to Robert, it was longer than a minute.
Okay. Where is that in the records? There's one. There's no other phone calls prior to that time that go anywhere other than voicemail.
I had talked to Robert that day multiple times.
I agree. It shows that you talked to him at 9:33, at 7:53. But you told Detective Meyer that you were talking to him about 1 o'clock, and this record shows a call at 13:06 between your husband's cell phone and your cell phone.
To me, that would sound like maybe the answer machine picked it up and I didn't answer because I was on another call with Jonathan.
So why did you tell Detective Meyer you called him and talked to him about 1?
I wasn't sure exactly what exact time it was that I had talked to him, but I know that I talked to him multiple times throughout the day because of details that he had told me about his lunch and what he was doing.
Okay. Do you
And
need
that
me,
was nothing out of the ordinary either.
you need me to go through the records to show you Robert's cell phone activity that day?
No, you don't need to do that.
Okay, so we just have to go off your word, contrary to the cell phone records.
No, if you want to, you can.
So based on the records, you're
I
on the
didn't
phone
have
with...
these records at the time in front of me when I was being asked what time I had spoken to Robert or not spoken to Robert.
So based on the records, you're on the phone with Jonathan Hearn and on the phone with your husband. What did you tell Jonathan after you got off the phone with your husband?
I don't remember what I told Jonathan. possibly could have told him what Robert had told me. I don't know what I told him. I don't remember.
Well, in one of the wiretaps we listened to, you let Jonathan Hearn listen to your conversation with Detective Meyer. Do you recall doing that in regards to this phone call?
In regards to this phone call?
The phone call at 13:06 on August 17, 2014.
Repeat that, I'm sorry.
In one of the wiretaps, you let Jonathan listen in via phone to your contact with Detective Meyer. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Did you do
listening.
that on August 17th?
No. No, I did not. Absolutely not. Never did I do that.
You were texting Rob that day as well?
Yes.
Okay. We saw some of the text messages.
Okay.
You were texting Jonathan Hearn as well?
Yes.
How many times did you call Rob?
Many times. Probably. Since
And why were you calling him multiple times?
I do remember, I don't know, throughout the day that was normal, as well as it was to call Jonathan.
More towards the evening, let's say after 7 o'clock when he got up, was to get off work.
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall calling him?
Yes. Always when, or close to Robert coming home, I would always talk to him, and the kids wanted to talk to him.
Okay. And so you were calling, as the evening progressed and you didn't hear from Robert, you were calling him, in your words, to find out where he's at.
Yeah, when he was coming home.
Okay.
When he would be home, because it varied.
Now, did you make this call, were you concerned or you just were wondering?
I was wondering, and it became a concern.
Just look at the records. There shows quite a few phone calls between you, your husband, from your home phone, or from your phone to John, or to Robert. I'm sorry, it's a lot of phone numbers. You started calling him around 17:01 or 5 o'clock in the evening. Does that sound right?
If that's what it shows, then yes.
I'm sorry. It goes to voicemail in. Let me hide it. So let me make it so you can read it, Ms. Limon. Just for context, on the far left, it says calling party. That's who is making the call.
Okay.
And then on column C, that is dialed digit number. So I'm going to start with 1701. Calling party is 241-8060. That's your home phone, correct?
Yes.
Dialing 7845. You were trying to get a hold of Rob at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Same thing at 1729. sorry, at 18:13, it shows set the cell phone ending in 7844, which is your other phone, calling 7845. So you're trying to call Robert.
Yes, I was.
Moving on to 1814, again 7844 to the phone ending in 7845. You're trying to get a hold of Robert.
This was nothing out of the ordinary. If you were to look on other phone records, it would. This is something that would happen.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to get a baseline for where you started to get concerned.
Okay.
August 17, 2014, 1858 or 658, your landline calls his cell phone.
Okay.
Are you concerned at this point? Worried?
No, probably not at that time.
Okay. 1914 hours, same question, your landline to his cell phone. What was your state of mind at this time?
I don't remember exactly what my state of mind was, but I wasn't. I wasn't in a panic.
Okay. Moving on, 4 minutes later, 1918. Same thing, landline to his cell phone. What was your state of mind at this point? I mean, you're starting to call pretty regularly.
Trying to get a hold of Rob.
Okay. Moving down to 1929 hours. Landline to Robert's cell. What's your state of mind? So it's 7:29 at night.
Wondering where he was.
Okay. 1936 hours. Your landline to his cell. What was your state of mind? Because he would have been off work at this point. He should have called you
Right.
on the way home.
Probably at that point, more than wondering now, really wondering with concern.
1947 hours, your landline to his cell. Starting to get later. What's your state of mind?
Concerned, but not panicked.
Okay. Now 3 minutes later, 1950 hours, same thing. Your landline, his cell. What's your state of mind?
The same, probably.
Okay. 1 minute later, your landline to his cell. What's your state of mind?
Wondering when he was coming home.
Another minute later, we're starting to come about every minute now. What was your state of mind at the 1952 or 7:52 from your landline to his cell? What were you thinking?
Leanna also wanted to talk to him, so she was calling him as well.
But when did you testify about that?
I haven't testified about that.
Okay. You testified that you called him.
Right.
Okay. Moving on to 1954. You called him from 241-8060 to his cell phone. Just kind of the same thing. You were concerned?
Yes.
Okay. 1959. You called him from 241-8060 to his phone. Again, concerned, wanting to get a hold of him.
Yes.
At 8 o'clock, 241-8060, again, to his cell phone. You called him. What was your state of mind?
Probably really wondering now at this point what was holding him up from not being able to answer my phone.
8:01. Home phone. You called him to his cell phone. It's about an hour after work now. Why are you calling him?
Wondering where he was.
And this goes on all the way until ultimately at the bottom, 2024. Later on that night, you find out from the BNSF people that something happened to Rob.
Yes.
going to direct your attention to a particular call. And this is from People's 19. These are Mr. Hearn's phone records. I know they're hard to see, but at 7:50, there's an incoming call from 7958. Whose phone has the ending 4 digits of 7958?
There was an incoming call from that number?
Yes, to Mr. Hearn's phone.
Oh, that was the cell phone.
So at 7:50 at night, you called Jonathan Hearn's phone. And this is after he had texted you at 7:50:03 and 7:50:16.
Okay.
Well, I mean, do you recall getting a text from Jonathan about 7:50 at night that night?
Actually, I don't recall that, but
Do you recall talking to him?
yes, I do remember that.
So the call at 7:50 and 33 seconds lasts for 10 minutes and 37 seconds. That means that call ends at 8:01.
Okay.
Does that sound about right?
Sure.
Well, I mean, what you recall from the length of the phone call? Was it feel like 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
It actually felt like maybe more, but
So I'm going to take you back to Robert's cell phone records.
Just a minute. I'm sorry.
Just have one question.
You got it.
Thank you. I'm going to draw a circle around 1950 all the way down to 2001. All of those phone calls made by you in your testimony to your husband's phone
yes.
were done while you were on the phone with Jonathan Hearn, were they not?
When I was trying to call Robert?
Yes. 7:51, 7:52, 7:53, 7:54, 7:59, 8 o'clock, and 8:01. That was during your 10-minute call with Jonathan Hearn we just saw from his records.
And I was trying to call Robert?
Do you recall being on the phone with Jonathan while making all of those calls?
No.
That's good, Your Honor.
All right. 15 minutes. Remember not to form or express any opinion or discuss the case. We'll see you all back in 15 minutes, please. attorney. On the stand, subject to cross by Mr. Smith, and I'll put forward the box. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Mr. Smith, if you'd like to continue.
Thank you. Now, I know we've called it a burner phone a lot, but did you call it by that?
That's what Jonathan had referred to it as.
But what did you call it?
A burner phone.
Okay. So that it's okay to use that terminology because you used burner phone as what you called it.
Yes.
Okay. Now, as to the burner phone, where did you hide it? Like, in the course of having it, where did you hide it?
In my nightstand.
Did you keep it on top of stuff or hidden within the nightstand?
Tucked in the drawer.
Now, the burner phone, did you call other people with that phone?
No, never.
So that phone was exclusive for Jonathan?
Yes, it was.
Did you keep it pass-coded? Which is where you have to put something in to open up the phone?
I don't remember that. Maybe, but I don't remember that.
Well, you've hidden this phone in a drawer tucked in the far back. You weren't concerned that anybody...
Objection. This states it's a testimony.
Was your testimony was tucked in the back?
It's a logical inference, but I guess I could restate.
Sustain.
You've kept this phone in a drawer, hidden.
Yes.
Okay. Were you concerned somebody would find it?
Yes.
Did you take any other steps to ensure that Robert wouldn't find the phone and look through the phone?
I would just make sure it was well put away.
Now, the phone that you used to call Rob, your personal cell phone, where did you keep that phone?
Out.
Now, the photos that we've seen throughout this, those actually came from your personal phone to Jonathan. Is that, if it was 2013?
If it was before I had gotten that other phone, then yes.
Okay. Now, once you got this secondary phone or burner phone, did you still send him photos?
Yes, I'm sure I did.
What types of photos?
I'm sure all types of photos.
Okay. So similar to what you had done throughout your relationship?
Yes.
And he would send you photos as well, photos of himself?
Yes.
Would he send you explicit photos too?
No, I don't really remember any.
Okay. So they were primarily of him clothed?
Maybe some with the shirt off, or, I don't know.
Your Honor, if I could approach, have an item marked.
Please.
People's 98 and 99 marked next in order.
Yes.
Ms. Limon, I'm going to show you what's been marked as People's 99. You you just review that packet? You can review the text messaging and also the photographs that are in the back of the packet.
Okay.
Do you recognize the text messaging in there from the time frame of November 18th and 17th of 2014?
I do now.
Well, do you recognize it?
Yes.
Okay. Who is the text messaging from?
From Jonathan
Okay. And who was it to?
to me.
There's also some photographs that are within that. What is a cell phone download? Do you recognize the large photo to the back?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall receiving that photograph from Jonathan?
Yes.
If I may approach, Your Honor?
Please.
Showing you also People's 98. Do you recognize this photo?
No.
Your Honor, if I may approach, have another item marked.
Yes.
Equals 100 and 108 marked next in order.
Your Honor, I would request to play People's 100. It is an excerpt from the initial contact that Ms. Limon had with Detective Meyer on August 18th, 2014.
Any objection, Mr. Chairman?
So many.
Give you a minute. Please proceed.
I would also request to hand out transcripts, Your Honor.
All right. This is audio.
It is, Your Honor.
Deputy Barron's going to hand out a transcript. You know what I'm going to say. Actual evidence is what you hear, not what you read. Those of you old enough to remember records that came in album form, on the inside it would have a sleeve that contained the record. And on the sleeve would be the words to the music. Wasn't always right, but it was close. Same idea. Counsel agrees stipulating that a report does not need to take down 100 in light of 108 being marked.
So stipulated.
So stipulated.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, does appear everybody has a copy. Proceed, counsel.
Okay. Okay, now, as far as Robert goes, do you know if you ever had any trouble with anybody?
Never.
Never?
Never. Everybody loves Robert.
Okay.
Loves him.
And so everything going pretty normal with your guys' relationship? There was no issues or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Love him so much.
And he hadn't had, there was nobody you can think of that might be upset with him, or he's never told you before that?
No.
Okay. How about his coworkers? How does he get along with his coworkers?
Great.
Okay.
Everybody. Tell you what, everybody loves Robert. Everybody.
So no one had ever, he had never told you that he was having any issues with any of the coworkers at all whatsoever?
Take the jury, Mr. Smith.
Ms. Limon, do you recall this being from your initial law enforcement contact over the phone with Detective Meyer?
Yes.
Okay. If you recall, how long after you had been told Robert was hurt or killed did you speak with Detective Meyer? And as an estimate?
Hours.
So what we've heard right now is hours after you've been told your husband was deceased.
Yes, if that was the first call that Detective Meyer had, the first time speaking with him.
Now, you've talked a lot about that you wouldn't want to sully Robert's legacy. That's kind of what you're using as your reason. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So the first one starts out, now as far as Robert goes, do you know of him having any trouble with anybody? That's not talking about a relationship whatsoever. That's talking about, does Robert have any animosity with anybody? And you answered never. Okay. What effect does that have on Robert's legacy?
Robert didn't have, he didn't have trouble with getting along with others.
Okay. Well, I think there was a guy that he told over and over again to stay away from his wife. Do you recall that?
Yes, he had spoken to Jonathan on one occasion and again through a text message.
Okay. Do you know of him having any trouble with anyone? You answered in the negative. And then you followed up with, everybody loved Robert. Was that true?
That's how my heart still feels till this day.
Okay. Jonathan loved Robert.
I wasn't thinking about Jonathan at that time at all.
And then the question was asked, is there any issues with your relationship? After you've been asked if Robert has any problems with anyone.
Right.
Okay. To that you said no.
Yes.
Okay. So far we've got 3 lies to law enforcement within the first few hours. Is that fair?
Objection, lack of foundation, the state's the evidence.
Overruled.
That's how I felt in that moment.
Again, there was nobody, this is line 13, there was nobody you could think of that might be upset with him. To that question, you said no. Why did you say no?
Because nobody came to my mind that would be upset with him.
Well, you talked to somebody that day or the day prior for 3 hours and 45 minutes that was upset with him. Didn't like how he treated you, didn't like how the kids were being raised, and you're saying that didn't come to mind.
No, and that's not the discussion for 3 hours and 45 minutes that I recall.
Okay. So let's move back to August 16th. Did everybody love Robert at that moment in time?
I felt that way in my head, in my world.
Okay. What about Jonathan?
Jonathan was critical, not only of Robert, not only of how he, opinions he would give me, ideas of to things that might better direct the children in my raising them. But he was critical of people, places, and things. Not just Robert or me or my children, our children. He was very opinionated.
Then you're also asked if Robert had any issues with any coworkers, and to that you said no.
Correct.
And it is true from what we've heard, Robert did not have any issues with any coworkers.
No, he did not, that I was aware of it all.
We've heard friends testify, we've heard coworkers testify, quite a few people. None of them had any issues with Robert.
No.
Just one person. Is that correct?
I was having an affair, and I didn't, my mind didn't think of it like that. I knew that Robert wasn't happy about my going outside of our group, or outside of the leash that I was allowed. But I didn't think of it that way at the time.
So at this moment in time, what we've heard, you are in sole possession of the knowledge other than Jonathan Hearn, that Jonathan Hearn knew where your husband was working, that Jonathan Hearn knew that your husband was going to Tehachapi that day, and that your husband had had issues with him over the phone and through text messages.
Yes, but at that time I was not thinking of Jonathan Hearn. I was thinking about what was going on at that moment, what had happened to Robert, which at that time, speaking with Detective Meyer, I was not aware of anything, anybody doing this to Robert. They had not told me that at the time. They had said he'd gotten hurt. So I wasn't thinking about Jonathan at all.
You testified that you wanted to protect your husband's legacy. So you had to be thinking about Jonathan because that involves you and Jonathan in an affair.
I wasn't thinking about mine and Jonathan's affair at all.
So when you answered the question about no issues in your marriage and you said no, your mind didn't think about the fact that I've had a 1.5 year long affair.
I didn't want to expose my affair.
So now you're testifying you did think about your affair as you're going through these questions with the law enforcement.
Well, as far as anybody having anything against Robert, Jonathan did not come to my mind, no. Not wanting to expose my affair, yes.
How would Jonathan not come to your mind if anybody had a problem with Rob?
He just didn't at that time. I didn't feel like Jonathan hated Robert at all.
Do you remember then, if you were told initially that Robert was hurt, when were you told that he was dead?
I was told right away that they were sorry.
Did you contact Jonathan Hearn the next morning?
After, I don't remember exactly how long it was that I contacted Jonathan.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as People's 19. This is from the time frame of June to September. What I've done is filtered it out to the 18th of August 2014, and when Mr. Hearn's phone is connected to yours, and since this is Mr. Hearn's records, incoming means from your phone to his. Does that make sense?
Yes.
At 6:28 in that morning, the day after your husband died, you sent a text message to Jonathan Hearn. Do you remember what that text message said?
I don't remember specifically what it said, but I remember telling him that Robert was gone.
Did you inform him what you had told law enforcement?
No, I don't remember that. I don't think so.
So you told, according to your testimony, you told Jonathan Hearn that your husband was dead. Why do you keep texting him?
I don't know.
Okay. Wouldn't you think it'd be, my husband is dead? And
That's
you're
all
done.
That's all I remember, saying that I lost Robert, and I had so many people and things going on that I don't remember having time to continue to text him, so I don't remember why or what reasons I had.
So do you remember what you sent in the content of the 12 text messages hours after you talked to law enforcement on August 18, 2014 from 6:28 to 6:35 a.m.?
No, I don't remember exactly what I said, but
You said that Jonathan Hearn started to come over to your house after Robert's death.
yes.
Did you want him there?
I was not at a good state of mind, and I had a lot of people and family and everyone around, and I had let him know that I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen with us, but that I needed to, I needed space, and I needed to figure things out, and I wasn't able to do that. I remember the time that Jonathan had come over. He had just shown up. He'd let me know that he was in my area, and he just wanted to see me. And came through my backyard, and at that moment I felt comforted by him, and I didn't know how I was going to feel when I saw him. I was nervous to see him, just for the sake of not because I was scared of him, but because I was feeling bad. I was sad that I lost Robert, and when I saw him, I felt better.
Now, did he come primarily during the day, or did he also come at night?
It was at night that he came the first time.
Following that, what was kind of the pattern?
It was both.
Now, when he would come at night, would he enter in through the front door?
That first time he had come through our backyard.
Okay. After that, when he came at night, did he ever go through the backyard?
He had come through the backyard and the front door. He had.
And when you say at night, what time are we talking about?
Late, when the kids were sleeping.
So if he was to come at night, you would wait until your children were asleep in their rooms, and then he would arrive.
Yes.
How often did this happen?
He started coming around right away, quite a bit. I don't remember exactly. Like I said, there were a lot of people around me, so.
Okay. Did you want him there?
At first, I wasn't ready to see him, but he wanted to see me, and then after that, he made me feel better.
Okay. How long was it before you were ready to see him?
I felt better after I'd seen him, and it just happened. I mean, he just started coming around, and it's like a whirlwind to me at this point.
Show you what's been marked as People 74. This will be the first page. It's already been testified to that this was from you to Jonathan Hearn. Let's start with September 5th. There's 2 text messages on that date that's been moved into evidence. That is 19 days after your husband deceased, 13 days after his funeral. Oh, how I love you. I adore you, Jonathan Hearn! ! You sexy guy. Did you write that?
Well, apparently I did.
Oh, how I love you even has, I believe, 4 exclamation marks. So is this the period where you wanted him to stay away?
No, it was before that.
Okay. So in less than 3 weeks, you were over your husband.
No, I was not over my husband. I had not even begun to grieve or feel what had truly happened. I can't explain that time in my life. It's unexplainable.
2 days later, I want to kiss you right now and not stop.
Unexplainable.
Same day. I love you so much, baby. I miss you so much tonight. I miss you. I feel God's purpose and strength working in my life and our relationship. I love you, Jonathan. And that last part's in all caps. You're already in a relationship, and your husband has only been deceased for 3 weeks.
I was in that relationship prior to losing Robert, obviously. That wasn't a new relationship.
I miss you so much tonight. You wanted him to be there. That's what that statement means. Isn't that correct?
He did make me feel better
Okay.
for
Well,
some reason at
You're
that time.
kissing him and you don't want to stop. And you're
No.
missing him and you want him there.
That's what those text messages say, but
And the only difference we have now is your testimony in this trial.
well, you weren't there at the time.
Moving on, 2 days later, again, all caps. This would be September 9th. Again, I am missing you. This is at 5:58 a.m. A couple seconds later, I love you, all caps. Same date, a little bit later. Wow, I love you. Again with exclamation marks. Same date, a little bit later. I love you and need you, baby. Again, you wanted Jonathan to be with you. Isn't that correct?
At that point, I don't know what, where my mind was, obviously. It looks like that's where it was, but it was very scrambled up. And lost.
All right, 2 days later. This would be September 11th. Again, I love you, Jonathan, all caps. At 6:18. You are so loved by me. I want to do so many things for you, baby. You remember writing those texts?
I don't remember, but I don't remember. That time feels like
Okay. We'll move down to September 11th. Just had a question about the text at 6:58 and 26 seconds. I'm going to draw your attention to this portion. I feel super blessed! Exclamation mark. Do you recall writing that?
I don't, because I don't recall a lot of that time. It was a blur to me, but Jonathan did come in and want to help me at that time, and I felt consoled by him, and he made me feel better at that time.
So, 25 days after your husband was killed, you felt super blessed.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Well, what you wrote at the time, you felt super blessed.
Well, I wasn't.
down same day, how's my Jonathan? That denotes possession. He was, at that point, had become your man, had he not?
I always refer to everybody that way that I care about. I always put my in front of who they are to me.
September 11th, again, 25 days after your husband was deceased, at 1:30. I got something practical for you today in town. It will one day be something we share in our home. So 25 days after your husband was deceased, you are purchasing items for the home you're going to live in with Jonathan.
I don't remember what that was or why I wrote that.
Well, wouldn't it make sense that you wrote that because you bought something to share in your home with Jonathan?
That's what it sounds like there.
And you had been to the location before Robert's death where Jonathan was going to build the home.
I had been there twice.
And you had spoken with Jonathan about your future together.
I had fantasized.
Well, this isn't fantasy, this is action. It's purchasing something, correct?
It sounds like it.
Last one I'm going to draw your attention to is the last page of that same exhibit, People's 74. September 12, 2014 at 8:29:03, 26 days after your husband was deceased. Baby, 3 exclamation marks. I love you, in all caps, so much. 11 O's. Why did you write 11 O's?
I do not know. I cannot explain these at this time.
Move on to some later text messaging that's been testified to. This is October 5th, 2014, less than 2 months since Roberts died. Baby, you are my partner in this life. My partner. What does that word mean to you?
Partner means to me who you're with, who you team up with, I guess.
Next line, I'm so ready to live life fully with you. Why did you write that?
I guess that's how I was feeling at that time.
I will wait on God's time and trust in His plan. But I am ready for us. I need you, my Jonathan. Why did you write that?
I guess that's how I felt at that moment.
And ask you about 13 days later, October 18, 2014, at 6:45. I'm in love with you. 4 exclamation marks. Deeply. And then this line's interesting. A love that I've never felt before. Why did you write that?
I don't know. I don't know why I wrote that. He was like someone I'd never met before. And I guess that's how I was feeling at that time.
Okay.
I was searching for, I guess, a rock to stand on.
So as to the love you're speaking about here with Jonathan Hearn, this is something that you had never felt before, even with your husband, Robert, according to your own words, correct? Jonathan
was, the relationship I had with him was definitely a different feeling, a different experience than I had ever had before.
November 1st, 2014. Draw your attention to the last line of that extensive text. So, how's the love of my life this morning? This is 2 months, 2 weeks after your husband's been dead, and you're calling Jonathan the love of your life.
I can't really explain that besides, I guess that's how I felt in that moment.
From all the texts we've just gone through recently, you had replaced Robert in essence.
No, there's no replacing Robert
Which
ever.
one of those texts shows that you had not replaced him?
You won't see it through a text, but there's no replacing Robert Limon ever.
We'll take our lunch recess there, ladies and gentlemen. Remember not to form or express any opinion or discuss the case. We'll see you back at 1:33.